Question 3 basically looks at optimization. Now, optimization, you must understand, it basically looks at how a firm will maximize either its profit or revenue. So from our calculus class, you must remember the following principles: that total revenue is simply given by multiplying the price times the quantity. But when you divide this total revenue by the quantity, the name changes to average revenue. Now, when you differentiate the total revenue with respect to quantity, the name becomes our marginal revenue. Okay. In a case where we have our price, for instance, as 100 minus 2Q. Using this formula, total revenue becomes what? Price times quantity. So meaning our total revenue will be 100 minus 2Q, and here we put a Q outside. So our total revenue, therefore, would be what? 100Q minus 2Q squared. When we divide this total revenue divided by quantity, the name changes to average revenue. So what we do is we divide the quantity throughout so that we avoid mathematical errors. The answer must be the same as the price that we had. Let's see, 100 divided by Q is 100. 100Q divided by Q is 100. 2Q squared divided by Q is simply 2Q. So this is called our average revenue. But if you're going to check it, it is the same as the price that we had initially here. So our average revenue in a perfectly competitive market is the same as the price. Now, when you're differentiating this function, the TR over the Q, this is what we call our marginal revenue. The T becomes an M, if you want to remember. So 100Q, when differentiated, it is 100. 2Q squared, when differentiated, we get a 4Q. So this is what we call our marginal revenue. Then under optimization, whenever the marginal revenue is equal to 0, we are maximizing what? Profit. We're maximizing revenue, sorry. So we maximize or we optimize at different levels. So anything M and equated to 0, it's optimizing. So MR is equal to 0, we are maximizing what? Total revenue. Marginal profit is equal to 0, we are maximizing what? Profit. Marginal cost equated to 0, we are minimizing cost. Cost we never what? Maximize, we minimize them. Okay. So this takes us to what is called cost theory. Under cost theory, you must understand that cost theory, where total cost is given by total fixed cost plus total variable cost. So when you divide the total cost over quantity, the T becomes an A. Like I said, anything divided by. So this is average cost. Total fixed cost divided by quantity becomes what? Average fixed cost. Total variable cost divided by quantity, this becomes what? Average variable cost. And when you differentiate our total cost over quantity, this is called the marginal cost. So these are very key and important points. So now we have a point where total revenue exceeds our total cost. That we call it a profit. So profit in essence is simply given by total revenue minus total cost. That is what we call our profit. So I must emphasize that you always need to put the profit and total cost in the negative. Now, I'll generalize the steps for optimizing. What is to optimize? To optimize is to find the best price and quantity that will give you the highest or the lowest function you want to. So to optimize is to maximize revenue, is to maximize what? Profit. Optimize is also to minimize what? Cost. So generally, we use the word optimize if you want, but you can't say maximize cost, no. You can say maximize revenue or maximize profit. So there are 5 steps I will give you. Number 1, you find that function. Number 2, we differentiate that function. Number 3, you equate to 0. Number 4, you solve what? For Q. Okay. Are we together so far? Are we following? Are we together?
I'm following.
Okay.
I'm also following.
So if we're given the price function as 170 and as 5Q, and we're given the total cost as 40 plus 50Q plus 5Q squared. Let's maximize revenue to start with. Who remembers the steps? Step 1, find what? The function. So which function do we want to find? The total revenue. What's the formula of total revenue? Price times quantity. So here we're going to have 170 minus what? 5Q times the quantity. So total revenue therefore will be what? 170Q minus 5Q squared. That's step 1. Find that function. Step 2, who remembers? Differentiate, right? So we're going to differentiate the TR over the Q. This is called our marginal revenue. So what do we get here? 170 minus 10Q. Step 3, what do we do? We equate to what? To 0. So if our MR is equal to 0, so here we're going to have 170 minus 10Q. Step 4, you solve for what? For Q. So here when this one comes inside, we're going to have 10Q is equal to 170. And divide both sides by 10, our Q becomes 17. So what we've done is just to maximize. Are you together? So remember, this was our total revenue function. Suppose they asked us to maximize profit instead. We use the same one procedure. Step 1, find the function. What is the formula for profit? Who remembers? Total revenue minus what? Total cost in brackets. Our total revenue calculated as 170Q minus what? 5Q squared. And our total cost has been given as what? 40 minus what? Plus 50Q plus 5Q squared. So we need to compute it. The like terms, first we expand these brackets by removing. So the negative negates everything positive. And if there's anything negative, it will become a positive. So we put the like terms together. 170, we'll subtract what? 50Q. Minus 5Q squared minus 5Q squared. Then the 4 will be alone. So profit will therefore be equal to 120 minus 10Q minus 40. Step 1, find the function. Step 2, differentiate. Are we following? The profit over the Q. So this is 120Q. So in differentiate, we're going to have 120 there minus 20Q. What happens to the 40? It will drop out. Step 3, equate to 0. And step 4, solve for what? Q. So here we're going to have what? 120. So Q, when you divide both sides, would be 6. This is what we call optimizing. Are we together?
Yes, we are.
You can go through for the last time.
Okay, so we're optimizing two functions, the total revenue and the profit. So the procedure is to find that function, you differentiate, equal to 0, and so for Q. So we are told that total revenue is price times quantity, and we're given the price function at 170 minus 5Q. We just impute the Q there. So when we distribute this by that is 170Q, this by that is 5Q squared. Okay, then that is the first step. Then step 2, we differentiate the TR by the Q. So 170Q becomes 170. 5Q squared, remember from our calculus class, is 10Q. Do you remember how to differentiate?
Yes.
Then having done that, we now go to equate. MR is equal to 0. So 170 minus 10Q, when this one comes this side, it will be a positive. So we divide both sides by 10. So here divided by 10, here divided by 10. So our Q is equal to 17. So that is our final quantity. Same applies when we want to maximize our profit function. Total revenue must be equal to the total cost. So our total revenue, we just calculated it from the previous question here, 170Q minus 5Q squared. So here is our profit function. Then here are 40 plus 50Q plus 5Q squared. So we expand this part, the negative negates everything there, so they become negative. Then like terms, 170Q minus Q, the 50 comes there, be minus. Then minus 5 is minus 10. The 40 will be alone there. So this is our profit function. So step 1, we have found the function. Step 2, we differentiate the Q over the profit over the Q. We have 120. Q becomes 120. 10Q squared becomes 20. The 40 drops out. Step 3 equal to 0. So negate the function here to 0. The 20 comes this side. We divide both sides by 20. So our Q becomes what? 6. So this is how we maximize, or we find the output that maximizes profit. So in this instance here, we need to be very careful with how the question is coming from. The total revenue for an energy drink, Trade Kings, is given by TR and TC. So we are being asked to determine the value of Q that will maximize what? Profit for max. Then determine the value of Q that will maximize revenue for max. So which one is easier of the two? Part B. How do we maximize revenue? Step 1, find the total revenue function, which we are given here is what? 600 minus 0.5 Q squared. Step 2, differentiate it. The TR over the Q. This is called our marginal revenue. So 600, what happens to it? It's, they made a mistake here. It's supposed
Drops out.
It drops out, yes. But it was a mistake. So supposed to be corrected.
Oh,
So
I see.
600Q is supposed to be what? 600. 0.5Q squared becomes what? 1Q if you want. So this one comes this side. For step 3, we do what? We equate to 0. So when MR is equal to 0, so this one will be 600 minus 1Q. So this one comes there. Q is equal to what? 600. So how many units will maximize revenue? 600 units. How do you get? That's how we get the 4 marks. All right. Similarly, how many units will minimize average cost? Step 1, we find the average cost. Who remembers the formula for average cost? Average cost is what?
Total cost minus Q.
Okay, average cost is what? Total cost divided by quantity. So our total cost is this one. We divide by quantity on each of them. Quantity here, quantity there, quantity there, quantity there. So here, no, that would be average. Yes, average cost. So here to be what? 1,500 over Q plus 150. So this Q and that cancels. Minus 4Q, because the 2 Qs we're going to remain with 1. Then plus 0.5 Q squared. Step 1, find the function. Step 2, differentiate it. Average cost over quantity. So here, what we have, differentiate this part. So this is the same as what? 1,500. We have to use positive indices, -1. So this one by that one, it is -1,500 over Q to the power 2. And 150 drops out because it's a constant. What is 4Q and differentiate it? Negative what? 4. What is 0.5 Q squared? We get positive what? 1Q. Step 3, equate to 0. So here, this one goes this side. And cross multiply, and we solve for Q. Okay. So this is how we go about this question. They should have given you more marks on this one here. It's a little bit tedious. Then to find the profit maximizing output, you find the profit function. Starting profit is equal to total revenue minus total cost in brackets. Find the profit function, differentiate it, equal to 0, and solve for Q. So that is exactly what you're supposed to do. Okay. Otherwise, this is under optimization. Any questions? I really want you to try this. It's already there in the pamphlet. I've solved it. But I need you to try this.
On this particular, yeah.
Pardon?
I'm a bit behind on this particular question.
Okay. Please listen to the recording on the steps that I've given. Maybe I can do the part A with you guys. So how do we maximize revenue? How do we maximize profit? What is the first step? Find the profit, number 1. What's the formula for the profit? TR minus what? TC in brackets. Okay, our TR is what? 600 Q minus 0.5 Q squared. And our TC was given by 1,500 plus 150 Q. Minus 4Q squared. Then plus 0.5 Q3. So you now expand this. So 600 Q minus 0.5 Q squared minus 1,500. Then this will give us minus 150 Q plus 4Q squared, because this is a negative. This will give us a positive, then minus 0.5 Q3. Then here we are going to just do the like terms. 1,600 minus 150, we're going to get 450 Q. This one minus 0.5 Q squared, plus 4q squared. What are we going to get? We're going to get a positive 3.5 q squared. Then the minus 0.5 q to the power 3 will be alone, and minus 1,500 will be alone. So step 1, find the profit function. Step 2, who remembers? We differentiate. So the profit over the Q. So here we're going to have 450 plus 7Q minus 1.5 Q squared. Then this one drops out. Then step 3, equate to what? 0. So this becomes what? A quadratic equation. So minus 1.5 Q squared plus 7Q plus 450. So use a quadratic equation now. Our A is what? Negative 1.5. Our B is 7. And our C is 450. So you find two values. Now those two values, if one is negative, one is positive, you pick the positive value only because you never get negative quantity. If both are positive, you are going to differentiate again this profit function. And if it gives you a negative, you get the minima. So here you differentiate for the second time. You're going to have what? 3Q n plus what? 7. And we get to 0. So the value, if we're going to get a positive, we call it what? Maxima. If we get a negative, it's called a minima. So you always get it when we're getting a negative value. So, or you can substitute the two values in the profit function. The one that gives you the highest profit is what you pick. So basically, this is what I taught in the previous class. I ask you to revisit the class recording that I sent to you. Okay, then lastly, you should understand that there will be definitions that will come. Let's understand the following formulas. What is a value of the firm and what is operating profit. Anyone who remembers anything? These definitions are important. What is a value of the firm? What is operating profit or business profit? What is production function? I mentioned a few of them here. For variable costs.
Variable costs are costs to vary with production.
Yes, correct. Variable costs are costs that vary with production. What is elasticity of production?
Maybe I try number 3. Production function is a function that shows the relationship between the input and the output.
Okay. Yes, the relationship. Okay.
Then break-even output is simply the output that the quantity in units that shows that the total cost as the total revenue is equals to the total cost. Then you have broken even.
Okay.
The level of output.
All right. Anyone
In
else?
business.
Okay. I'm glad he's been reading. So I need you guys to also put efforts in reading. Okay, just to help out, the theoretical ones, please, if you're not very good with calculations, ensure that you also maximize on the theoretical part. Okay, so make efficient on those key parts. So here are some of them. We can find them and as follows. So value of the firm simply refers to the monetary worth or market capitalization of the company, representing its overall assessment in terms of assets and liabilities. It represents the amount that a business is worth in the marketplace, taking into account profitability, growth prospects, industry trends, and market conditions. Business profit is also known as net profit earnings. It's simply the financial gain or surplus which is obtained by a company after deducting all the expenses. So in short, it's a revenue minus total expenses in terms of costs and taxes. So it measures the profitability of a business. Production function is simply an economic concept that measures the relationship between the input, which are the factors of production, and the output, which are labor and capital. We have a mathematical equation which comes as follows. Q equals the function of labor and capital. All right. So we also have variable costs. These are simply expenses that change with what? The level of production. Break-even output is simply the level of output at which we neither make a profit or loss. So in other words, the point where the firm covers all its expenses, including our fixed costs and variable costs. So break-even output is simply given by total fixed cost over selling price minus what? Variable cost. So elasticity of production simply is known as marginal rate of technical substitution or elasticity of substitution. It measures the responsiveness of quantity of output to changes in quantities of input. So it measures the degree to which a firm can adjust its input mix in response to the changes in input prices. Then we also have what we call diminishing returns. Diminishing returns is simply a concept we use in economics that states that as we add more units of a variable input, such as labor and capital, to a fixed input like land or machinery, as the production process continues, the incremental output by an additional unit will eventually decrease. In simpler terms, we're simply talking about the rate of increase in output will be slow as we add an additional unit. So that is what you needed to understand. So regarding the value of the firm, so you'll be asked to compute the value of a firm. For instance, a firm which may, in year 1, have maybe 100 kwacha, year 2, 200, year 3, year 1, year 2, year 3, maybe 500. And we're given 8%. So to get the value of a firm, we can compute the cash flows over discount rate to the power n. So for year 1, we have 100. The rate is 8%, so 1.08 to the power 1. Year 2, we have 200. 1.08 to the power 2. And year 3, we have what? 500. 1.08 to the power what? To the power 3. So the value that we have for 100 kwacha today would be less than if we're going to collect the amount. So 100 divided by 1.08, we're going to get 92.59. And 200 divided by 1.08 squared, we're going to get 171.47. And 500 divided by 1.08 to the power 3, we're going to get 396.92. So when you add these ones, they'll give us a value of the FEM, 0.47 plus 92.59. So this is going to give us 660.98. So we're going to see, adding these figures individually, this is 700, 900. But because of the inflation rate, these figures will be discounted. And they'll give us the value of a FEM based on the discount figure that we have as given above. Now, this question came in a slightly different manner. So I need us to calculate the value of a FEM for the following exam question. So we needed to understand the grammar very well. So we're told question number 1, that the owner of the firm expects to make a profit of 100 for each of the next 2 years and able to sell the firm at the end of the second year for 800. The owner believes that the appropriate discount rate is 15%. Calculate the value of the firm. This is 10 marks. So how was this question supposed to be answered? So this is how the information we are given. So year 1, what are we told? The expected amount is how much? $100.
100.
So the firm expects 100 for each of the next 2 years. So year 1 and year 2 is 100, right? Then expects to sell it at the end of the second year for 800. So again, at the end of the second year, at how much? 800. And the discount rate is 15%. So value of the firm will therefore be what? 100 over what? 1.15 to the power 1 plus second year 100 over 1.15 to the power 2 plus the last expected payment, which is 800 over 1.15 the power 2. Most people were putting 3 there. That's how they lost their marks. So here 100 divided by 1.15 give us what? 86.96 plus 100 divided by 1.15 squared. This gave us 75.61. Then here we have 800 divided by 1.15 the power 2, 604.91. So when you add this, 75.61 plus 86.96. So here we get 767.48. So this is the value of the firm. So 10 marks for that. If you don't know that, you cannot guess. All right. Are we together?
Yes.
All right. So we end here unless there are any questions.